Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. You're going to listen to an interview with Gregory Landua, CEO of Terra Genesis International. We're going to talk about, of course, the opportunity impact investors have to get active in the regenerative agriculture space. But most importantly, in this interview, we're going to discuss the role of blockchain. What can smart contracts and a distributed ledger do for the regenerative agriculture space? Enjoy! Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered. A podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! So welcome to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered. I'm Koen van Seijen, the host of today. In the podcast of today, we have Gregory Landua, CEO of Terra Genesis International, a regenerative design consultancy based in Idaho. Welcome, Gregory.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming. And to start with a personal question, what's your journey into regenerative agriculture and why did you end up here?
Well, that's a great question. I think I went to school as an undergrad student in environmental science. And at that point, and I think still, that discipline is pretty focused on explanations of the problems of sort of the planetary crisis of species extinction and global warming and environmental toxicology. And at that point, there was a lot of talk about the impact of aerosols in the stratosphere and ozone depletion and other things. And I really just got tired of all of the doom and gloom and started sort of my own exploration of what kind of solutions exist out there and how can humans, through our economic activities, be a force for health and balance on a global scale and in our home ecosystems. And that search led me to encounter permaculture when I was quite young and start engaging with the art and science of designing human systems that increase ecosystem health while meeting human needs instead of extracting value from ecosystems in order to meet human wants, is how I would sort of juxtapose the search that I was engaged in with sort of business as usual. So from there, it's just been a deepening exploration of how that search for how to meet human needs and increase ecosystem health can appear and where the most strategic intervention points are in the system to help the economy start to shift towards one that is really celebrating and honoring all life in the way that the economy functions.
And when you look at these entry points or where the most possible impact could be made at the beginning, you identified supply chains and you identified companies in that supply chain. Can you explain why that is and what you actually do in those supply chains?
Sure. Well, so one thing to recognize is at Terra Genesis, we very rarely use the concept supply chain, actually. And there's a whole history of how that term came to be used in business. But the short version is that term basically represents an extractive mindset.
A linear system.
To yank and extract value in a linear way from sort of a pool of value and put it in a place where it is of relatively more value. And so we sort of think of the value adding stream. So there's a stream where so we speak about value adding streams and the potential of engaging either at different points in that value adding stream or with the stream as a whole with businesses is really enormously potent, right? So my passion and my quest early on was, and still is in a way, to transform as much of the agricultural landscape towards a landscape that can draw down carbon from the atmosphere and uplift the farmers and communities that are the stewards of that landscape at the same time. And so in order to do that, we really need to be working systemically, connecting to the businesses that are purchasing ingredients and adding value to those ingredients before they come to the end customer. And so really, in order to change on a large scale land use, especially agricultural land use, we need to be working with the businesses that are making the big purchases and that are complexifying and adding value to that which they're purchasing. The ingredients that come from, the Amazon rainforest or the soy fields of Middle America, wherever it might be.
So as an entry point, that's the leverage point you're using in this stream, basically. And what do you do with these companies when you have many examples, obviously, when a company comes to you and say, okay, we want to stop looking at our supply chain as a chain, but as a circle or as a stream, where do you start?
Yeah, so there's sort of a change from, I oftentimes describe it from sustainable supply chain is sort of a concept and people have a fixed idea of what that means. And then, so oftentimes companies come to us with this sort of sustainable supply chain business paradigm where they're looking to optimize for certain key metrics or indicators. And we're sort of taking them on a journey that leads them to the next step, which is what we would call the regenerative producer web, which is in a producer web, you're starting to recognize what you just spoke to in your question, which is, this isn't a linear chain. And actually, everyone in the network of value adding is adding value. There isn't sort of this strictly linear relationship. There's a more complex relationship. And in that, so working with companies to help them with their mindset shift from sort of a linear, we're extracting X value, to, okay, there's a web of reciprocity here and we're playing a key role. How do we understand the role that the other members of this web are playing and grow their capacity to do that better while we're growing our capacity to produce a better product for our customers? So the way that looks in a very tangible way is we engage with analysis and assessment of the system of supply, risk assessments, opportunity assessments. We engage with the company to sort of invite them to be able to see an image of what the ecosystem that they're purchasing ingredients out of could look like at its optimal health. And in order to do that with a business person, it's sort of like a crash course in ecology and oftentimes even sociology, understanding the cultural dynamics. So we're really inviting our clients into a much deeper understanding of the places that they're interacting with and making purchases from so that they can become a partner to that location in generating healthier results for both the ecosystem and the clients of the company.
And I can imagine that's a process that takes much longer than the average client purchaser agreement, etc. What's the role of time in this space?
Yeah, we generally like, of course it's important to sort of have a period of courtship so that we can all build trust in one another. So we usually engage with a discrete bit of work to do the assessment process and a few key bits of education where no matter what happens, they can have kind of a strategic roadmap moving forward that's highly valuable, really rooted in the ecological, social realities of the places that purchases are being made. So there's a discrete engagement, and that usually lasts, somewhere around 6 to 8 months, where there's assessment and education happening. But generally, we're looking at sort of a 3 to 5 year time frame, because the goal here is to grow the company's capacity to be thinking and acting regeneratively, so that the effect that they have on the systems that they're interacting with is to actually grow the capacity of that system itself to evolve in response to climate change, in response to innovation, whatever the dynamic needs are. And what that does is it creates a really robust and resilient relationship between the company and the place, where they're both growing capacity. So that also invites the customers of the company in an extraordinarily exciting journey. So there's sort of a lot of ways to see the value proposition of our work. But as you were noting, it isn't a short-term solution. In order to start to learn to engage with complexity and do so in a way that has regenerative results, it's a journey, and it's building new business habits, it's building new capacity, and really it's being able to see problems with new eyes so that the solutions that are inherent with those problems can actually be identified and nurtured.
And maybe that's actually one of the barriers. What are the barriers you see after being working in this sector for a while? What are the barriers to the regenerative agriculture sector to scale up? Maybe not scale up as we're used to in the software world, but to reach more of those hectares and many more of those farms and land stewards. What are those barriers that are currently holding the sector down and not making it reach its full potential?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I think points to some of, in fact, points to some of the solutions that software may actually offer. So for an ecological system to be healthy, it needs to have biodiversity. And your listeners who are somewhat familiar with ecology or keep up with environmental news oftentimes will have heard, we're losing biodiversity at a rapid rate. Well, that's not just in the wildlands of the world, that's also in agricultural systems. So the enormous richness of heirloom crops has been diminishing as companies optimize for yield, and usually chemically fed yield. Over 50 years or so of the Green Revolution, there's sort of been this bottleneck where the agricultural diversity of the world has collapsed. And that's because of the single big problem, which I'm going to sort of speak about, that's limiting the spread of regenerative agriculture, which is sort of the logistics of bringing diversity to the marketplace. So we have a global marketplace that's built very efficiently to bring single crops from large-scale farms into the commodities market, and then from there spread it amongst the diversity of businesses that then add value to the crop and create food or cosmetics or medicines, whatever it might be. We've basically forced ecology to match our abstract logistics and economic system. Instead, we need to redesign the logistics and systems of exchange to match a healthy ecosystem. And what that means is the potential here with this problem, I think, is in software that allows distributed purchases into diverse agro-ecosystems. So if a farmer no longer has to optimize for a single crop in order to just sort of sell bulk and have very low margins, but instead could sell, 5 or even 10 different crops off of the same piece of land and have those crops efficiently distributed to all of the different buyers in a way that that system of supply can aggregate at the appropriate scales and then distribute at the appropriate scales, we would basically have a system of supply that can meet a healthy ecosystem where it's at, and in fact increase the health of the ecosystem and the farmer while engendering a very vibrant economy.
And is that the angle? Because I read some articles before, the angle of where blockchain and the distributed technologies or software we're seeing the birth of now come in and could play their potentially vital role?
That is my opinion, 100%. In fact, we're devoting substantial resources at this point to the development of agricultural specific applications of blockchain technology, because the potential to have a verification system of the increase of ecosystem health, right, through key indicators like carbon, the drawdown of atmospheric carbon into soil and above ground biomass, biodiversity, these are all things that we know how to monitor and can be embedded into a smart contract in a distributed ledger system. So when you combine that sort of layer with the ability for blockchain to track provenance and create transparency through a value-adding stream, you have this enormously powerful tool for disrupting and transforming the way the entire global system of supply works and regenerate that system of supply in a way that is in service to the health of the ecosystem. Now, I know that there's a lot of buzz and there's a lot of excitement about the blockchain, both in investment circles as well as in development circles, and even in agricultural circles to a certain degree. But I don't really know of very many other projects that are really asking what's the highest use of the blockchain as a tool for regenerating agroecosystems in service to the health of the planet. And that's really the next big thing for Terra Genesis International and what we're devoting our coming year to in partnership with some of our existing clients and, you know, a growing pool of investors who are interested in sort of pioneering that disruption.
And if you can tell, of course, where would be the first application of this technology in your eyes? Like if we speak in a year from now, I mean, you're devoting your time now to that and your resources and focusing on that. And if we would talk in a year from now, what would we be discussing now in terms of blockchain and regenerative agriculture in an ideal scenario?
Well, I think in an ideal scenario, we will have a robust proof of concept and beta already running with several ingredients so that people can see how it works, and some of the troubleshooting and problem solving that inevitably will come up can sort of be underway. And we will basically have a pretty powerful and robust information product based on the blockchain that companies large and small, and as well as end customers and producer communities, can all engage with in order to make decisions together about what does regeneration mean in their shared context. And that's something that's very important to me, is that we start to understand that regeneration isn't an abstract ideal. It actually has to be recreated in specific context. So a regenerative agriculture system that has to include the farmer, the businesses that are engaging with it, and the details of the geography, the culture, the context, the ecology, right? So every place actually is going to have sort of this unique expression. And in 1 year, I am really passionately excited to see groups of stakeholders come together in a way where the blockchain can sort of mediate and capture the conversation and agreements in order to explore what's the highest potential expression of this agricultural system for this entire group of stakeholders, including the living world, including nature.
And to ask a bit more technical question, how are you building a blockchain? I mean, I've read a lot about it, but it's still not completely clear to me. Where do you start from a vision that you just draw in the last few sentences to how do you get concrete, and where do you even start?
Well, that's a great question. Luckily, we have a really great group of allies that have been pioneers in the development of some of the large blockchain systems, we're currently working towards building our vision on the Ethereum platform for a variety of different reasons, mostly pragmatic.
It's the most flexible.
Yeah, there's such a robust development community right now, and several of our allies are very integral in that community. So it gives us the ability to sort of both know what we don't know and know who to talk to about that. And I think that's key for businesses who are engaging with the blockchain, because it is pretty esoteric on a lot of levels, as is regenerative agriculture, interestingly enough. So we have these two sort of highly specialized skills. And from my perspective, really what we're doing right now is we're working on a project that can marry the technosphere with the biosphere again, so that the tools that we're using, this amazing technology, are working in service to the health of ecosystems, not just extracting value for sort of a utopian ideal that's disconnected from the health, the sort of basic functional health of our planet and water and the carbon cycle and biodiversity, but instead is interconnected and interdependent with that health. And so to speak really directly to your question about how are we proceeding technically, very carefully, and we're slowly building a team. So our expertise for years has been very grounded in our ability to work with communities and to work with the soil and to work with the agro-ecosystems and all the stakeholders who engage with that. And so at Terra Genesis, we've sort of developed a capacity in design for complex ecosystems and stakeholders. And so from our perspective, we're approaching the blockchain not as sort of a holy grail, but as another member in an existing and complex ecosystem that we're inviting to the table to infuse the work that's already underway. So we're not looking at the blockchain and asking, sort of what's the abstract potential here. We're looking at the blockchain and inviting a conversation about what's the potential in our specific context.
And to speak about a specific context, can you walk me through, let's say, again, we're talking a year from now, and I was one of them, or I'm still one of the people involved in the pilot. I'm a cocoa farmer in Central America. Of course, I'm completely regenerative, so I have multiple ingredients that I'm growing, of multiple things that come off my land that might have value and maybe didn't have value before. How do I engage? Does it work on my phone? What do I do to be part of this stream?
Yeah, so you're engaging on your phone, basically, or at a desktop computer at the internet cafe down the road. And you're engaging with a platform where you can actually see, who is enjoying the chocolate bar made out of your cacao. And you're able to, by engaging with your cooperative, the cooperative that you're a member, you're able to go on and not only track global commodities prices, but also make decisions, sort of informed financial decisions about, together with the other, with the buyer, you're able to make decisions about the sale price that are informed by the variables that everyone has decided are important. Quality, right? So there's a contract about quality and you can test that. Land use, is the land use really up to snuff? Are you producing multiple ingredients? Is carbon being sequestered into your agro-ecosystem? And not just sort of enforcing things on the farmer, but the farmer then gets to look upstream and say, oh, is that chocolate business doing what it promised? Are they, are they selling that chocolate bar with a story that's in integrity with what's really happening on the ground?
Are they using my photo fair enough? Yeah.
Exactly. Am I getting value for the extra layers of marketing that I supported them with the tour and the photo and other things? So we start to be able to level the playing field so that the farmer is actually participating as a user in this market ecosystem instead of just as the sort of the foundation of a pyramid where value is being extracted.
And to ask the stupid question, why is that possible now or in the near future with blockchain and not with all the tools we already have on the internet?
Well, I actually think it was completely possible before.
So why is it not done?
So this is just sort of a philosophical perspective. And perhaps am going to receive some hate mail from people who are true believers in blockchain technology.
We can handle that.
But my belief isn't so much that blockchain is sort of a radical difference. It is that because people believe it's a radical difference, we're having conversations that people were scared to have before. And so the enormous amount of attention going into the question about what a distributed economy means and how it could manifest in a way that is in service to not just centralized sort of economic power, but all of the participants of the economy is something that's happening at an increasingly frequent rate and with higher and higher quality. So that discourse is generating the ability, from my perspective, for people to actually believe that it's possible. Whereas before, something about the conditions meant that most people would just eschew and say, no, that can't actually happen. We can't actually have that kind of a system. I do think, just a caveat to what I said, it's not just sort of the larger shift in belief that's taking place, although that's a big part of it. And I think it shouldn't be. The reason why I'm focusing on it is because I think it's too oftentimes forgotten. I also think that there's some very clear, the power of a distributed ledger, of a ledger that is hosted by everyone, not just a single entity who holds all of the cards, is enormously potent and opens up vast realms of possibility that didn't exist just 10 years ago.
Yeah, so maybe it's not we didn't go from 20% to 100, or it didn't become 10 times better or more potent because of the blockchain. It did there's a development in there that's unique.
Yeah.
But because everybody believes it did get 100 times better, we suddenly have discussions, investments, attention, focus. So it actually is becoming better and actually is becoming used, which before was only a theoretical discussion and maybe some research papers that we wrote about the distributed economy. And now actually people are doing it.
That's my belief, is that it's a combination. And in the synergy between that there is a better tool and it does exist, and there are sort of proof of the proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? That there are, Bitcoin is a global phenomena and the value keeps going up. There's attention. There's a massive amount of attention in altcoins. There's a massive amount of attention to Ethereum and the Ethereum enterprise platform, and it's growing. And that's bringing attention to the conversation, just 5 years ago, if I had just outlined, and 5 years ago, frankly, I was thinking about all of this stuff and working on it, and I may have said most of the exact same things if you had asked me those questions, just minus the ability to use the blockchain in a way that had you lean in and say, oh, wow, because I've heard it all over my social media, what this guy is saying actually might be true.
Or it might be possible. I think that's the difference.
Exactly. It might be more than possible. It might be a good investment.
Because everybody from IBM to your old hacker geeks friends are talking about it. So there's something there, and that makes it suddenly...
That's right. And so it's an enormously exciting time, I think, if we can invite the highly intelligent but somewhat abstract cyber community engaged with the blockchain to really be actively engaged with how this technology increases the health of ecosystems, agricultural systems, and the trade systems that connect humans to those systems. We'll really have something exciting to be talking about in a year from now.
Which is not easy if you see most of the research or the money and investments are flowing towards making bank transactions faster and just a few milliseconds because they earn on that. And so it's not it's not connected to Earth, literally.
That's correct.
And I think it's absolutely essential, but it's not going to be an easy stretch to get IBM or whoever looking at ecosystems and biospheres, etc. They have to at some point anyway, but we hope we do it a bit before that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I agree. I mean, I think the potential here, I think we're really very much at a crossroads. And the potential is that this technology is only used to optimize the extractive economy more. But there's another potential, and that potential is that this technology is used to engage in an inquiry about how investment creates multiple forms of return, multiple forms of capital, not just financial capital, but the living capital that out of which all other wealth is born, and how to actively create ways for us to be engaging and including the health and vibrance of that living capital pool into our systems of trade. And I'm not, just as a disclaimer, I'm not actually a big fan of just sort of monetizing ecosystem services, because I think that the complexity of living systems is too much to be accounted for, in quotes. So we're really walking a razor's edge here. So I personally have this philosophical belief that we can't simply just sort of have a quote unquote true cost economics and internalize all the externalized costs in the form of ecosystem services and have sort of an economy that works perfectly. I don't actually believe that. However, I do believe that some very pragmatic steps in moving forward using blockchain distributed ledger systems for trade and for accounting for ecosystem services is clearly the next step for shifting the economy in a way that actually is serving the health of the planet, and not only needs to happen, but already is happening. So there's a certain point here where sort of my personal philosophy is very likely to be tested. But at the moment, I think it's very aligned with what sort of the imperative that is the exploration of how this technology can serve the communities and ecosystems that are the foundation for all, whether we believe it or not, all of the wealth that's being exchanged in a millisecond, in a nanosecond, as financial capital liquidity actually sublimates and gasifies and turns into sort of this global omnipresent ether that makes transactions instantaneous. That can only be supported with a very clear connection with the slower rhythms of planetary health.
Yeah, at the end, I don't know who did the quote, but it's you can't eat money at the end. I mean, there's always and a lot of people live a bit of outside that biosphere, or think they live outside the biosphere until they stopped. But I think it's an interesting, the true cost is an interesting example of extracting companies thinking about their externalities and letting these reports being written, and then usually get really scared because they are actually making a huge loss if you just internalize a few of the externalities, because most of them you simply cannot even measure. You get quite far,
right?
But already with only maybe half of it or a third, etc., they are way deep in the red numbers if you start calculating that. So maybe it serves as a wake-up call that their supply chain, as they are still calling that, is in fact broken, or at least not functioning if you look at the bigger picture.
That's right. It's a huge step. And the companies and investors who invest, and that's, so that sort of true cost and internalization of externalities is going to happen, I believe, because there's growing awareness and growing pressure. It's sort of, the writing's already on the wall. Companies aren't going to be able, they'll find ways to externalize, but many of the things they're externalizing right now they'll be forced to internalize. And companies and investors who realize that that's happening, that trend is underway and sort of in the process of actualizing into the economy, and the disruptive force that will create, people who have the foresight to invest in regenerative agriculture and in the systems of supply and technology that support regenerative agriculture will be in a very solid position for the new economy that's being born, because those are industries where there are no externalities, where the net benefit to the system is greater than the cost. And that, I think, even just as a hedge, right, that even there's a small probability that what I just said is true, it's worth investing significant amount of capital. So I fully believe that even if, we could invest 10 or 15% of the available financial capital that's buzzing around the planet right now in regenerative agriculture and the foundation of the regenerative economy in the next 2 or 3 years,
we would change the world.
We would change the world. It would completely transform things. And that, to me, is a very attractive proposition to investors, because if you're saying, look, we need a group of, 5 hedge funds and, 100 venture capital funds, and we want all of you to dedicate 10% of your assets to this project, not our project in specific. I couldn't even metabolize that amount of capital, but the larger project of, regenerating the agro ecosystem and the system of supply as the foundation for a new bioeconomy, and invested in the land base for that and the technology for that, and all of the other aspects, the upskilling that's going to need to take place, and all of the myriad millions of different exciting business opportunities, everything from sharing economy, ecotourism plays, to real estate ventures. I mean, there's a lot there that could be very attractive if just 10% of investment portfolio of, like I said, 5 or 10 hedge funds and 100 venture capital groups, we would have enough working capital to actually change the direction from, pending doom of our biosphere and our ability to live here, where we have to go to Mars or something, in a futurist scenario, to a vibrant Earth where humans are actually living in a way that's coherent with the health of the larger ecosystem, and we can still go to Mars and do all those other things. So
yeah, we still have 90% left. So
that's right.
We can pay for a few rockets.
We still have plenty of capital, and I believe that eventually much of that capital would cycle down.
Will flow in.
Because we'll show the different ways to return, not in an infinite growth economy that's based on extracting more value and producing more needless goods and marketing it, but the new burgeoning economy of creativity, where the knowledge that is born out of this exploration shows a myriad of different returns on investment.
And let's say we're in front of a theater full of smart impact investors, or as all investors, including us, think we're smart. What would you say, what would be the first step? They're all interested, they're all excited after this half an hour, and they want to get in. Where do you start, and what should you look out for?
Well, so, of course, give me a call. I'm always happy to chat. But, that aside, in a sort of general pattern level, I think the places to start are really, where are you as an investor interested and passionate about? What and what are the linkages with your existing investment portfolio to a regenerative economy and a regenerative agroeconomy? Because there's enough complexity here that, you can't just dive in to, Project X that's all the way across the world and expect to have good venture returns. You need to be investing in places where you have some ability to sort of vet the potential for success, because there'll be many good ideas out there, but not all of them will have a solid return, because not all of them will succeed. I mean, that's why we're all in this in the end, is because we love to gamble and be right. So find the places where you can be right and concentrate on asking the question, what does this sort of sector, whether it's commodities, sort of bulk commodities, or vegetables and grocery, or confectionery and cacao, or cosmetics, or real estate? What does this place where I already have some understanding of the way the extractive conventional economy looks, what might a play look like in the new disruptive, distributed, regenerative economy look like in this place where I'm already excited about, right? Do a little mapping there. And then start to look for people who are active in those places and have conversations with them. I mean, that's a very practical roadmap for engaging. I think the most important, from my perspective, the most important place to engage right now actually is in the information side of this. We need to figure out how to monetize the knowledge economy around regenerative agriculture so that we can rapidly accelerate our research and development of agroecosystems. And that to me is complementary with this play into the blockchain are the two highest leverage places to begin the conversation about regenerative agriculture investing. So what does R&D in regenerative agriculture look like? It looks like investing in the potential to have model farms in every ecosystem across the planet that are basically highly monitored and wired so that the practices, both ancestral and indigenous as well as modern, that increase biodiversity and increase soil carbon and increase the health of the whole ecosystem, increase the quality of the products that come out of it, can be monitored and then used to extrapolate into this larger global system of value exchange. People who invest in that and companies who have that kind of capacity to share that information in a distributed but monetized way with a global economy are going to have enormous capacity not only to make big moves in the future, but also to have a steady income stream because everybody needs that information. So those would be the two places where I personally would start from my vantage point.
I want to thank you so much, Gregory, for taking the time today and sharing your knowledge and an interest. And I'm sure we'll check in a year to see where the blockchain has landed for the first time in regenerative agriculture and to discuss the potential, the lessons, the early stage diseases, etc., that were for sure in the system, and we'll see about the future.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Koen, and I look forward to checking back in a year from now to see where we're at.
You just listened to an interview with Gregory Landua. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and learned as much as I did about the potential role of blockchains in the regenerative agriculture space. I'm sure to be checking in with Gregory in a year to see where his projects have led him. Thank you for making the time to listen to this podcast and making it all the way till the end. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording this podcast since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? What questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space. For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, ag-tech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're going to look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.